Yes. When we start on the committee to build the development comprehensive plan, kill more trees. This project. So, yeah. I can pay what happens. It's yeah. So, and we updated it for Stephen was short. Yeah.
All right, folks, it's getting to be 10 o'clock. Can you all wind up your conversations? Thank you. Okay, everyone, welcome. It is Thursday, January 25th, 2024, and this meeting of the MAPC Advanced Plans Committee is called to order. Roll call, Foster is here, Chuck Warren, here. Joe Johnson, here. Hugh Nix, Cindy Miles, John McKay, here. Tony Zimmelman. Tony is absent, so we have a quorum of 6 and we will proceed. First item on the agenda is approval of the previous meeting summary from January 11th, 2024. Has anybody seen any corrections or has any comments on that? All right, we have a motion from Cindy Miles and a second from Chuck Warren to approve the previous meeting summary from January 11th. All those in favor say aye. 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 Anyone opposed say no. Motion carries 6-0. One other thing I would note, she should have an updated meeting calendar, which now shows our advanced plans meetings, which I appreciate. For those of us on this committee, we'll have 2 meetings per month through the end of February, and then hopefully go back to 1 meeting a month unless something else comes up. Okay, next item on the agenda is the Solar Energy Conversion Systems Moratorium. And our recommended action is just to reach consensus on potential draft text amendments to the code and or the comprehensive plan, but no vote. So, Justin, you're up.
Good morning, everybody. Justin Constantino with the Planning Department. I'm going to give you a brief update on the Unified Zoning Code as it relates to large-scale utility solar. Let's go to the next slide, please. What we'll do today, as the chairperson just mentioned, review the information, receive any additional feedback from the committee. Let's go to the next slide, please. Just a quick disclaimer, we currently don't have any applications currently in the docket right now. So today we'll just be going through these comments and we are not considering any applications currently as part of our review process. Next slide, please. So like I mentioned before, I'm going to give you a status update. I will go through a lot of the items that we have been going through over the last couple meetings. However, it will be a condensed version. I'll talk about the process. I'll give you an update on public input as we've received a lot more input from the public in the last few weeks. Again, I'll reiterate some of those themes that we've discussed, go over next steps. I'll introduce potential additional topics as it relates to large-scale utility solar. And then I will also give you an update on the Sedgwick County Association of Cities meeting that staff attended last Saturday on the 20th. Next slide, please. All right, so let's go through the process really quick, just for some folks that may not be aware and to get us up to speed. Let's go to the next slide. Let's see. Perfect. Thank you. So where we are right now, obviously it is the 25th, the 8th, February 8th, which will be our next Advanced Plans Committee meeting. We will be looking at final draft changes for recommendation to the full Planning Commission. So I'm going to go through a quick recap of kind of where we're at, go through kind of some of the draft language that we've established leading up to this point. But the goal will be on February 8th to make a final formal vote to the Planning Commission for their meeting on February 22nd. So let's go to the next slide, please. Here is the full schedule. As I mentioned, staff did a brief presentation on the 20th to the Sedgwick County Association of Cities. We will be taking this presentation to the county advisory boards, the Board of County Commissioners staff meeting on February 6th. We will be looking at, as I mentioned before, taking these out to the cabs throughout the month of February. So we will have several meetings in the middle there. March 6th is currently the date that we are looking at for the Board of County Commissioners for their approval. And then March 20th, the moratorium expires. So this schedule not written in stone. There is some potential flexibility there. But as we see it currently right now, this is kind of where we're at with our schedule prior to the moratorium expiring on March 20th. Next slide, please. Okay, so just to go through a quick recap, these staff reports are available to you. We didn't put them in your packet because they are quite bulky, but they are available on the city website. They are quite comprehensive. We have reports for the Solar Town Hall event that was taken place back in November. And then we also have our solar survey report. That was a survey done from November 16th through the 28th. Solar best practices report, and then the solar public input report, as I mentioned before, that has been updated frequently. So I will get more into each of those shortly. Next slide. Best practices, like we've been doing throughout this entire process, we've looked at other communities, we've looked at academic research regarding large-scale utility solar throughout the region and throughout the country. So that has been part of our research. Next slide, please. Public input, obviously a significant portion of this process. Let's go to the next slide. As I mentioned before, the survey that was released mid-November got a lot of good feedback for that. Town hall also in November. Letters and emails received. You do have an updated public input report that has been included as part of your packet that is in front of you. And we've received several updated letters. Basically everything that we've received up to, I want to say yesterday afternoon, has been included in your packet. So that is in front of you and that will also be posted on the website. We've also received numerous in-person comments from folks on this process, as well as comments from elected and appointed officials as we've gone through several meetings and received a lot of really good feedback. So next slide, please. As I mentioned before, I think the last time we showed you this slide, we had received approximately 60 emails and letters. Obviously, that's well over 100 right now, so a lot of really good feedback from the public. A lot of those emails and letters obviously dated from when we kicked off this process back in October. It's through the present, so you have a very updated list in front of you. All of that is compiled in that public input report. Next slide, please. So again, just to readdress the themes quickly, this is what was derived from the town hall and the solar survey. Urban development and growth, setbacks, decommissioning, groundwater, soil quality were the four topics that really emerged from both the town hall, the survey, and all the public input that we've received. Next slide, please. So back in mid-December, we took those themes and as a committee, we decided that that was what we wanted to focus on. That was where we wanted additional research and have additional discussion. So again, urban development, decommissioning, soil, and setbacks and size and configuration were kind of the themes that we wanted to discuss moving forward. Next slide. So what we did was we took those themes, we've taken all the information that we've compiled thus far, including existing language in our comprehensive plan, our zoning code. We've taken all of the public input, best practices, information from other communities as we look to explore potential options. Next slide, please. And again, just to reiterate, we are looking at potential changes to both the Unified Zoning Code and the Comprehensive Plan. The Unified Zoning Code being specific language that applicants will refer to when submitting a large-scale utility solar project application. The Community Investments Plan, our comprehensive plan, is a long-range document that takes us through 2035. So any potential language changes that would come out of this process would be more general in nature as opposed to the more direct language that would come out of the Unified Zoning Code. Next slide, please. I'll go through the themes very quickly. Next slide. Decommissioning. Next slide, please. So just to give you a quick recap, I'll go through each of these 4 or 5 topics individually, but kind of a more condensed version where we're at right now. The advanced plans, recommendations through our meetings throughout December and early January. The things that we were comfortable with on decommissioning was removing solar equipment at a depth specified by the ordinance. We've decided on 4 feet. Financial assurance shall be provided by the owner or operator in the form of a surety bond or letter of credit. The plan shall indicate the length of time needed to complete the decommissioning, and the applicant shall provide a statement that the owner or operator will notify the city county in advance of the decommissioning. Next slide, please. The comprehensive plan, we recommended specifically on the topic of decommissioning that no changes should be recommended, no mention of decommissioning specifically with large-scale utility solar. We don't want to include that in the comprehensive plan. That was the consensus that we've received from this committee. Next slide, please. Groundwater and contamination. Next slide, please. Currently, as the Unified Zoning Code states, and it was, well, this is not currently in the code. This is recommended by the Advanced Plans Committee, requiring pre-construction, periodic, and post-construction soil and groundwater testing within 90 days of substantial removal of any portion of the system, as well as part of the zoning application process, requiring that the applicant include a list of construction materials to be reviewed by the director of the Sedgwick County Environmental Resources and HHW for recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners. So these were the 2 items throughout our discussions that the committee indicated that they would like to see added to the Unified Zoning Code. Next slide, please. Comprehensive plan, as far as soil groundwater contamination goes, no additional language recommended by this group. Next slide, please. Our third topic was urban development and growth. Next slide. Here is a quick snapshot of the 2035 urban growth areas map. Obviously, we've discussed this at great length, but what the map depicts is the urban growth areas in Sedgwick County. Obviously, the darker colors are the city limits, and then the lighter colors surrounding the city are the urban growth areas. Next slide, please. So this was something that was presented to the Sedgwick County Association of Cities on the 20th of January. We just wanted to go through the process. I know all of you are familiar with this process, but basically what it would look like if we were to receive a large-scale utility solar application would be the City Planning Commission would receive the notification from the MAPD that a proposed project is located in the area of influence. When I say City Planning Commission, I mean smaller city, a city within Sedgwick County. And then the city has that option to consider that item. They are not required to consider it. Should they decide to consider it, that small city planning commission would review the case and provide their feedback to all of you, to the MAPC. Then the MAPC would hear that case with the small city planning commission recommendation. So any application that we get, that small city will be notified and you will receive that feedback to assist you in making a decision as to whether or not that project fits. The Board of County Commissioners would then hear the case as well. If the small city recommendation is denial, so if you receive a letter and you make a recommendation and in their that small city's planning commission says, we don't want this particular project there, it does require 4 of 5 Board of County Commissioner votes for approval. So that is our current system. That's what's currently in place. Throughout that process, obviously cities can provide other comments throughout the process, including letters, resolution, verbal testimony, any of the above. Next slide, please. There was some discussion regarding the urban growth area, 3 miles. This map was provided by Invenergy. A lot of that 3 to 5 mile growth came out of the public survey. We just wanted to depict this here, showing what that would look like. The areas in pink would be the 3 to 5 mile buffer area. The areas in white would indicate the remaining areas that large scale utility solar would be allowed should they proceed with that. Next slide, please. This is the 1 mile map. I know there's been a lot of discussion that came up from one of the committee members. You've seen this map before. Very similar to the other map, except obviously the pink indicates the 1 mile buffer outside of the urban growth areas. I know there's been some discussion. A lot of the public input that we've received over the last few weeks has been from residents requesting that the 1 mile buffer be considered as part of your decision making. Next slide, please. On this particular topic, urban growth, urban development and growth, the majority consensus that we've received over the last few weeks from all of you, no changes recommended. Next slide, please. The contributing factors, basically the reasoning for your thought process there was that you were generally comfortable with the existing process. The current conditional use process provides the flexibility that a city can indicate whether or not large scale would be a good fit for their community. So also that there are plenty of opportunities throughout the application process for the cities to provide input. That's kind of why I went through those steps a few slides ago to reiterate that point that throughout several points of an application process, cities can certainly weigh in. Next slide, please. As this topic relates to the comprehensive plan, the majority consensus amongst this group is that no changes were recommended to the comprehensive plan. Next slide. I will go into our fourth topic, size and configuration. Obviously, there's several discussions within this topic, so I will address each one individually, beginning with setbacks. Next slide, thank you. Majority consensus regarding the Unified Zoning Code regarding setbacks specifically. This group didn't want to add any additional language to the Unified Zoning Code as it relates to setbacks. Next slide. Same thing goes, basically the contributing factor was on that, that additional conditions may be imposed on a case-by-case basis using the conditional use process. So if an application were to come in, you could look at that, look at the existing conditional use process and say, yes, depending on what this case looks like, we have the tools necessary to either make additional recommendations on that case. Next slide, please. Regarding setbacks in the comprehensive plan, no changes were recommended by this group. Next slide, please. Size limit. Next slide. No limit was the majority consensus from this group on limiting the size of large-scale utility solar projects in the Unified Zoning Code. Next slide, please. Again, the contributing factors there, part of your decision-making process was the additional conditions may be opposed on a case-by-case basis using the conditional use process. So again, each application would be taken individually. Next slide, please. Same thing goes with the comprehensive plan. You're starting to see a theme here, pretty consistent with no language required in the comprehensive plan. Next slide. Height. Let's go to the next slide, please. Currently, what we found with best practices, ground-mounted solar energy systems typically do not need to be more than 20 feet above the ground. That was generally the theme that we found throughout our research. Next slide, please. Limiting the height of solar panels to 25 feet was the recommendation from this committee. Obviously, there's going to be some flexibility there to potentially increase it during the conditional use process on a case-by-case basis. But what we discerned from our last meeting on, I believe it was January 11th, was this group was comfortable with limiting the height of solar panels specifically to 25 feet. Next slide, please. Again, that 25 feet number was based on best practices research and information collected from other counties and the ability to rely on the conditional use process for specific applications. Next slide. Regarding the comprehensive plan, no desire to add height as it relates to large-scale utility solar in the comprehensive plan. Next slide, please. Additional topics. I know that we had some discussion regarding differentiation between smaller and large scale utility solar. Obviously, the focus of this conversation throughout this process has been on large scale utility solar. The current draft that we have does differentiate between the two. Obviously, the difference being large scale for more commercial purposes, whereas smaller scale, more residential purposes, there is a differentiation that currently exists in the existing code. Fire protection was a big topic that came up I know there was some languages when we were doing research with certain counties that had language regarding batteries and the distance between battery storage. So that has been an additional topic that's sort of risen over the last week or so. I will actually, if it's okay with you, if you don't have any questions with me, potentially turn it over to Chief Timmons, who is joining us. Thank you for coming to potentially discuss battery storage. But before I turn it over, I'll take any questions.
Yeah, just one quick comment. So Justin, if you could, so it looks like we've done a review of where we are to this point, just to make sure everyone's on the same page. This is an opportunity for questions about all that information. And then going forward today, we'll have a presentation, a discussion with Chief Timmons from the County Fire District, who is here to share some insights about specifically battery storage and solar and fire. And then the second part of it will be then, Justin, is it to review the draft language for the changes to implement these changes? Is that right?
Yeah. Thank you for the clarification, Scott. That information, that draft language, you do have it in front of you. It's no different from the language really that's been included on these slides here. So, but that is included in your packet as well. And then I will, towards the tail end of the presentation, after Chief Timmons gives his presentation, I will provide a follow-up with the information that we received at the Sedgwick County Association of Cities meeting back on January 20th. So I will stop there, open the floor, entertain any discussion, obviously, and then if you have any questions or clarification on anything that I presented thus far, I'm all ears.
Any questions for Justin from the committee? All right, thank you, Justin. That seemed to me it amazed me how much after all the discussion and all the back and forth and all the public input, we eventually evolved back to what we have works. But good. All right, can I ask Chief Timmons to,
So, Scott, questions. Seems like we're just more or less acquiescing to conditional use rather than talking about specifics, particularly when it comes to size and some of the other things we're talking about. It could be any size, it could be 5,000 acres, I suppose. And we come in with conditional use and say, no, it needs to be 500 acres, as an example. So is that just clean everything up for us, just rather than talking about specifics?
If you all want to establish or recommend a limit, this is certainly the opportunity to do that. You'll also have the next meeting to do that. If you'd like to talk about what best practices have to say, what other communities are doing, we can certainly field those questions as well. So we're here for the dialogue and the discussion. I don't know if I have a good answer for you about whether you should or whether you shouldn't. It's just we're here to help you out with coming to a recommendation. And currently the recommendation is not to do that.
Regardless of what conclusions we draw, the fallback is, well, we can apply a conditional use to just about any aspect of the project. Isn't that true?
Well, that is mostly correct, because through the conditional use process, which is how these would currently have to come in, especially in the county where the majority of the land is rural residential, through the conditional use process, you have the ability to impose conditions on an application, and those can vary significantly, and size can be one of those.
I think we were also of the opinion that Sedgwick County being as developed as it is, there's just not a realistic likelihood that somebody's going to be able to come in and get lease on 5,000 acres of property. But are you concerned about that?
I misspoke. I'm certainly aware that you could come in and get 1,500 acres if you wanted to, a couple sections, 2.5 sections.
And do you want to limit or do you,
I'm just saying it doesn't really matter. If we can use it a conditional use and it's a case by case basis, then why establish any limit? I don't understand that.
Well, it certainly is an option that you have. So in terms of the question about why you would want to do it, I think it comes down to what is the best fit for the community. And in some communities, they've seen fit that to establish a limit, and in others, they haven't. And so I think that's really the question that's in front of you is what's the best fit for our communities in terms of how utility scale and commercial scale solar are considered.
Any other, John?
I think early on, we talked about the bonding or letter of credit, the guarantee. And we talked about getting some type of a system, because I don't know if any financial institution is going to do something for 20 years or 30 years. If there's some type of process in which
It's a
that have to happen.
Yeah, that's a great question. And so far what you've seen is what we're reflecting back to you of what we've heard in terms of your discussions and where we believe that the consensus is. And so the next step after the fire protection discussion will be to talk about the draft changes to the zoning code that staff have drawn up implementing what we think your consensus is. And so that'll be a great opportunity to talk more about what the brass tacks are, nuts and bolts are of that type of language. So we'll have that discussion later on today.
Okay, any other questions from the committee? All right, is it now time for Chief Timmons, I think, please? Justin, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Ty Ben, if you could go ahead and bring up Chief Timmons' PowerPoint, that would be wonderful.
Good morning. My name is Robert Timmons. I'm a Sedgwick County Fire District 1. And all this discussion of energy power, whether it comes from Wolf Creek Nuclear, or coal-fired power plant, electricity is inherently dangerous for firemen because water is our number one tool, and obviously they don't get along. A lot of the solar projects we currently have in Sedgwick County are small, and they feed directly into either the system or a building. Some residences have battery storage, and there's quite a few throughout the county that are that way. And we have disconnects that are readily identifiable by the meter on the back of the house. So we know when there's a solar, if it's dark and we can't see the roof, we can see that disconnect and we know there's power there. But when we talk about batteries, a lot of people don't have any concept of what is a battery. We currently have one, Evergy built one on the Sedgwick County Zoo property just to the east side of Sedgwick County Park or the Horseshoe Lakes. These are large Connex boxes. They're different from the intermodal containers that you see on railroads or on rail cars and semi-trailers, and that these are side opening containers instead of end opening containers. And inside of a Connex box like this, there's probably 16 pallet size large batteries. And each of these batteries are consistent of smaller batteries that are all in series. And in addition to the Connex box, there will be, because you have to convert the DC voltage to have a battery. It's not AC like on the main line or the grid. So they're going to have a step down transformer or two, depending on the size of the grid that they're hooking into. You're going to reduce from either 69,000 volts down to some measure 60 volt DC. And then it's going to go into the batteries for storage. And then when it leaves, and this particular facility at the zoo is for during the nighttime when peak kilowatt usage is at the lowest, they're pulling power off the grid and storing it. And then during the daytime when business and industry and stuff is in high demand, they're releasing this power back into the grid. And these are going to become more and more popular, whether it be through the electric companies or whether through private type solar array companies. I mean, they're dismantling all of our coal-fired power plants. So this is going to become what we deal with every day. A quick Google search of one such incident that went bad is ironically happened in Surprise, Arizona. If you Google search Surprise, Arizona battery explosion, there were 4 firefighters injured because they didn't know what they were dealing with. Because even with as all technology comes, it's very competitive, it's very proprietary, nobody shares what it is. And so my purpose for being here is just to discuss what are we talking about on storage? If it's a solar panel feeding directly into the grid, it's not really any different than wind generation, coal fire, or nuclear. It's electricity. When it's stored, it's a problem because now we have to deal with a facility that the number one problem with a lithium ion battery when it goes into thermal overload is it produces hydrogen gas. And when hydrogen gas is contained, as we witnessed with the Hindenburg, it's very flammable. And unfortunately in Arizona, when they walked up, they didn't know what they had. They opened the door, introduced oxygen, and the chemical chain reaction completed itself in the form of an explosion. We've got some wonderful built-in, if you can advance, there's another slide or another diagram. So there it is, that one there. They have built some F500 foam fire extinguishing equipment inside these containers. They have a couple of pressurized cylinders that then force the extinguishing agent into the Connex box if the batteries go into thermal overload. In addition to this, we required them to put what we call a fire department connection where we can hook a fire hose to the side of the container and pump it from a distance and try to cool the batteries. Thermal runaway in electric vehicles is a problem all around the nation. Some places in Florida are digging a hole on the side of the road, getting a front end loader out, pushing the car into the hole and then dumping water and flooding the hole because you just can't get water inside of the metal box that's full of batteries. So you can't put that fire out. This is a little different setting because we can engineer and design ways to get water into the container, flood it, and try to interrupt that thermal runaway and cool the batteries back down. This one in particular, after meeting with Wichita Fire and the industry representatives, because we met with Wichita because they're going to be the closest fire unit. So we consulted with them through the plan review process. In the future, we're going to move the fire department connection and make it what we call a remote one. So we're going to make instead of the connection being right on the side of the box, we're going to have them pipe underground, run it 150 feet away from the box and have it pop back up out of the ground so we can get even further away from it in the event of a thermal runaway. And I don't know, I'll stand for any questions. I don't know what.
Scott?
Yeah. So Chief Timmons, thank you very much for being here today. I know it was on relatively short notice, so I appreciate your willingness to be here and provide this presentation and take questions. One question I've got for you, I've got one for you and then I've got one for JR. So the first one for you is, with this type of battery developments, with these types of installations, are there any additional needs or special equipment that the fire department would have as a result of additional batteries, whether they be at solar facilities, or whether they be at Evergy places throughout the community?
I mean, water is always going to be our number one tool for fire. It's going to cool, and that's what it's cheap, abundant, and I mean that's our number one thing to deal with this type of problem. Distance is my one concern. In this particular case, this one is out in the field. It's away from all structures. It's protected by a stone wall or enclosure around it to keep people from getting in there and messing around. Distance and having the ability to get water in and try to cool the batteries. And this isn't saying this is what every battery installation is going to look like, because technology is currently changing. Somebody supposedly invented a new battery. They're still testing it that's not supposed to have the problems of lithium, but we don't know where that's going to go.
And I think that's an excellent point that I'd like to kind of piggyback on. And then I'll ask JR this question, which is, so the planning department and the fire district had been in conversations when we were doing the potential updates to the zoning code regarding solar, large scale and small scale. And as part of that discussion, there had been a recommendation of some text to be added to the code regarding that. And I think it was regarding fire district review of plans prior to their approval. So I'm going to ask JR if he could refresh me on that.
As much as I can, yes. I don't remember the exact language, but we did have that drafted where the fire district and or fire department, depending on jurisdiction, would have a review of the project
Prior to the plans being approved so that they have an opportunity to evaluate it based on whatever new technology is out there, provide comments and feedback about what's going to be in the best interest of the community in terms of safety, whether it's a buffer, whether it's a certain type of design or facility that's included in it, gives them a chance to weigh in on it.
Yeah, and my recollection from those meetings was I was very insistent that it go to a plan review process like any other project. Because even if it's not battery storage, even if it's just a field of solar panels, we have to address if an employee gets hurt, how do we get an ambulance in there? We have to have approved roads and drivable surface to get in there. And or if there's storage the storage is what is my big concern. That's where we have to make sure the safety rules are in place and that we can operate safely and try to mitigate the facility from a distance.
So Chief, am I understanding correctly that while these battery installations have the potential for problems, there are fixes that can reduce the risk considerably that are doable? Is that a fair assessment of what you've told us?
Yes, that is, and that's what the review phase is so important. When we look at this, we have to make sure what all are we affecting when we put, because this situation, there's only 2 Connex boxes full of batteries and it's all wrapped in stone to keep people from getting out of it or getting into it. But we want to make sure we have the safety and the ability to try to mitigate an emergency at that.
Perfectly reasonable attitude, and I totally agree. And I suspect everybody on the committee does. My question for staff is, what's the best way to accomplish these fixes? Do they go in the zoning part of this or in the MABCD part of this?
If I could, I think that there will be 2 parts to it. I think the answer could be both. And the reason why is because you definitely want this to be done as part of the permit process down at MABCD. However, with the draft language that we had come up with earlier and was able to locate it here is that project review and approval by the Wichita Fire Department or Sedgwick County Fire District Number 1 is required. Any issues of noncompliance shall be specifically articulated in accordance with the adopted fire code and any amendments thereto. So what that did is that would require it as part of the zoning application, is that there would be a review by either Wichita Fire or Sedgwick County Fire to identify if there's any noncompliance issues as part of the zoning process.
So that would be more like the access roads and so forth, as opposed to the details of this valve has to be 150 feet away or whatever.
I think it could get into that level of detail. It will depend on what they want and what they receive as well. So, but I think at this point, it could be it could give everyone a heads up about what the expectations are with that preliminary review, and also provide yourselves and elected officials some assurances that a project is meeting the standards of the fire code.
Okay.
And I will add, I just received the 2024 International Fire Code was released last week. I haven't had time to go through that 4-inch thick government document yet. But I did in my cursory, putting the tabs and separating the chapters. It is a reactionary document. They take a look at what is the trends. There is an entire chapter now on lithium-ion batteries for the first time. So there is actual guidance to help me when I review these kind of projects and to make it up to code and to make it as safe as possible.
That's reassuring. Okay, are there any questions from other committee members for Chief Timmons? All right, thank you, sir, very much. Appreciate it. All right, where do we go from here? Is it time for public or we still have more?
That's an excellent question. I guess I would recommend, since we've had kind of a summary of where we've been, and we had a little bit of discussion on that, and now we've had discussion about a very specific topic, which is fire. I think perhaps now pausing and seeing if there is any public comment could be good, because that could help inform you all if you want to make a decision about what should or should not be included in the code or comprehensive plan.
All right, in that case, is there any member of the public here in chambers who would like to speak on this item? All right, please go to the podium. You have 3 minutes. Start off with your name and address.
Hello, my name is Kent Rowe, 3353 North 159th Street East. I did turn up to the meeting at Mays, City Commission meeting, and I did write a letter, sort of not a counter letter, but one I think would be more in abeyance with the Mays City Council, and I'll just summarize this. While the city of Mays has no climate action plan, no decarbonization goals, and no prohibition on HOA's ability to criminalize rooftop solar, we do, as Mays, does support friendly conservation efforts and renewable energy projects. The city of Mays proposes conservation easements within utilities scale solar projects to include pollinator gardens, butterfly dells, native plant and animal species, and public walking trails and domains. Microsoft, Apple, Facebook all have 100% renewable energy goals. Companies that might want to come to this area needs to see this happening in some form. I wish that the monies were going directly to the city of Mays. We're having a shortfall of funds for schools right now in Wichita. But residents and businesses be allowed to earn revenue for subsequent building of renewable energy projects. And the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks can take part to mitigate, restore, regenerate native prairie spaces as identified in the 2035 map. And this is the best determination of solar energy storage, V2L, which is vehicle to load, vehicle to grid, vehicle to city or school, microgrid energy systems would not be detrimental to future growth of the city. That's what I read. The vote was still, what was it, 5-4 against, but one lady did perk up and said, pollinator gardens, dells, things like that. That was, thank you, 4-1. I don't think everyone in the residents understand what the benefits really can be, rather than building a salvage yard, gas stations and uncontrolled growth in concrete and steel. So I see this as a positive growth, one in which this good body can help regulate and do some very good things for this county. Thank you.
Thank you very much. 5 seconds to spare. Good timing. Is there any other member of the public here in chambers who would like to speak on this item? Name and address first, please, and your time will be up on the screens.
Good morning. My name's Alvin Neville, 14601 West 77th Street North. Our family is part of the Energy project as it is now. We're in favor of the solar project. One, because of its proximity to Evergy Power Plant. It's not just a pop-up thing out wherever. This is next to a major power plant where the solar can be fed. A lot of the fields in the general area there have one, if not two, major power lines that go out all through the state and beyond. We're in favor of the rules that are in place now. There may be a few small tweaks that could help out everybody. But as it stands now, we think they're good. When we were first approached by Energy, I wanted to make it clear, and I think I did over and over, that the people, our neighbors, are the ones that, we want taken care of because they are our neighbors. I said, you guys are here and gone when this is over, but we're still here with our neighbors. So I want you to do what you can, to help them out. Solar's a clean, quiet product. Doesn't produce carbon like ethanol plants do, or fossil fuel emissions to produce more energy. And I don't think you guys had rules in place before and they were following them all along. And, now it's kind of a hiccup to them after spending thousands of dollars of money to kind of put it to a halt and possibly kill it. And then my big thing really is from a landowner's spot. I don't think it's right for a city to reach too far out. I understand development and that, but on some of this ground, they're trying to control what we as landowners would like to do with it to profit from it now versus, I'm going to use maize. Some of our ground that they're wanting to control 15, 20 years out, and they need to draw that back closer to their town. If they're wanting to do that, it's no different than the Northeast Expressway. They need to be compensating landowners if they want to kill what we want to try and do with our ground. Where's it going to stop? If one of my family members wants to build on the ground and that, are they going to say no because we think it's going to be industrial down the road?
Or you're running out of
Ready?
time, or can you finish up in a bit here?
Yes, that would be great. Thank you. So yeah, my thing is property owners, don't let the cities overreach their boundaries. I understand the growth. We gave up some ground to maize. We talked with Mr. Lemunian that we have ground close to a railroad track. Yes, that's, close to development. We set aside some ground for Colwich on a piece of ground for future development. It'll be 15, 20 years down the road. I believe this is a doable project because it's close to Evergy. I agree with Mr. McKay that decommissioning as a landowner is a huge thing because I don't want to be in the business with Sanford and Son. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this item?
And Kirk Sponsor, Deputy County Councilor, just while they're walking up to the podium, I would just reiterate the focus of these potential changes would be and should be on the county as a whole, not just on one specific project. Thank you.
Name and address, please.
Yes, my name is Marilyn Fields. I live at 6728 North 135th Street West. The task you've been given is to review and recommend changes needed to the current zoning regulations regarding large-scale utility solar facilities. This requires much thought and consideration on your part to take in consideration all the issues involved with this type of a massive facility. My concern is that you recognize that any type of large-scale facility in Sedgwick County and areas of growth will impact the future of our county. And listening to the presentation and the proposed draft, it causes me concern that attention to detail has been taken. The residents of Northwest Sedgwick County were made aware of the currently proposed facility last year. However, it's been in the planning stages for several years. This is not a few solar panels here and there. This is at least 1.25 square miles panels based on the minimal information that's been given to us. I want to give you an example of the magnitude of this project. It will be at least 750 acres of solar panels, although up to 1,500 acres apparently has been leased. And that's, again, the information from the various meetings we've attended by the developer. But let's use the 750 acres for this example. Per the information given to us, there could be 1,500 panels per acre. That would equal 1,125,000 panels. That number of panels would cover a football field and stack 200 feet high. It would take approximately 4,000 shipping containers to hold that many panels based on the size of 3 by 5 feet, 3 feet by 7 feet by 6 inches thick. In addition, there would be miles of structural steel that would be required to support these panels based on the information from the developer. The steel would be placed up to 10 feet in the ground, which would also more than likely hit the water table. This is an enormous proposed project wherever it would be in Sedgwick County. The current area in Northwest Sedgwick County will be in areas of residential development that have kids playing. I have kids riding up on their bikes on the dirt roads up and down, adults running and walking the roads, high schoolers driving these roads in the already established developments that are in the area. There would place 8-foot-tall chain link barbed wire prison type fencing on 3 sides of some of the residents' homes. Comprehensive regulations are needed to protect all of these residents with detailed planning, maintenance, and decommissioning regulations, and specifically site placement outside of growth areas and areas of influence. A 1-mile barrier outside of these areas of influence is the minimum needed to protect our families and the future developments of Sedgwick County. Both Colwich and Mays city governments have opposed this project pretty much unanimously, sir. Please do your due diligence in developing these regulations and don't just kick the can down the road to the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Does anyone have a question for the speaker? You?
No, but I have a question for a counselor. I doubt there's anybody in this room that's present today that is on one side or the other of this solar facility between Mays and Colwich. To dance around and pretend like it doesn't exist is kind of nonsense. I mean, all of us who live out there, I mean, I don't mean that to you, but all of us who live out there know exactly what we're talking about. And to dance around it, I mean, I understand it's for Sedgwick County, but we're all here and concerned one way or the other about whether it ought to be out there and how large it ought to be and how it's going to affect all of us, whether we own the property or whether we farm next to it or live next to it. So
I certainly appreciate your comments. Once again, Kirk Sponsor, Deputy County Councilor. There's a certain difference in legal analysis and in how these different types of analysis should be approached. Right now, there's currently a look at the changes to the Unified Zoning Code as a whole. That is a legislative action. So that's one where you consider, hey, what if any restrictions do we want to put on all these solar applications, wherever they are, how big they are, whatever it may be going forward. When you start delving into specific properties, specific locations, specific projects, that would be more of a quasi-judicial analysis. That's what you see more in just the general zoning amendments, things of that nature. So that requires different approach. There are different due process considerations. And then there's even potentially different analysis. You start getting more into cooling factors, things of that nature. So really, when you are looking at these, I appreciate there have been comments on both sides about one specific project. I would just redirect the conversation to be as a whole with any and every solar project that may come forward. What rules and regulations do we want to establish?
those of us that sit on the committee can do that. I'm sure we can do that. But I'm telling you that anybody that's here to speak today is not going to approach it that way.
I certainly appreciate that. I'm not going to necessarily stifle their comments, but as I iterated earlier, this is the point of analysis that should be taken by the board.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? All right, is there anyone else who would like to speak? 3 minutes, name and address, please, and keep an eye on the little timer on the screen, please.
My name is Tim Mullen. I live at 6718 North 135th Street. I believe we do need to have a more defined definition of what large-scale solar facilities are. I'll give you an example of what I believe would be one and that some of our other counties have implemented in their regulation. The facility be a minimum of 20 acres with a maximum of 1,000 acres that convert solar energy into electricity for the primary purpose of storage and sale to third parties of generated energy. This term includes all facilities such as roads, substations, operation, and maintenance buildings. The system is connected into the transmission, collector, feeder lines, and/or battery storage, and is intended for use to large-scale networks such as the grid, not for individual use. To go along with the size, yes, I believe we do need to have a limit on the size. Otherwise, these things are going to go to 2, 3, 4, 5,000 acres, like, Madam, you were concerned with. Our area counties have stipulated their limitations. They've all said around 1,000 acres. That seems reasonable to me. Second of all, there needs to be a ban on where these facilities can go. Otherwise, you will limit our county, our small communities to grow. The ban will help ensure their safety, health, and future growth and development of the cities. As previously stated, that it appears this is the only transfer station that there is, which is the Gordon Evans in this area, that we're really, thanks to Commissioner Hicks has said, we do have one at Buffalo. It's north of Garden Plain, 3 miles north of Garden Plain. That land out there, it doesn't have near the population density that this particular area that we are talking about, which we can't talk about. So I do say, yes, there are other choices, but let's don't just limit this because of, and listen to us, but we're saying, the community is saying no. We have the city of Mays and the city of Colwich. Again, I know we can't talk specifically, but those two communities have voiced their opinion to you that says, we do not want this kind of a project in this area. We're not opposed to solar. It's just we need to make sure there needs to be some restrictions with them. And it was also stated in the previous MAPC meeting that there are other land developers out there looking for it. We know of at least 2 others, and then there's that project appears to be south of the Wichita Airport. And I believe it was the other energy company who here has identified that. Plus, I believe they are also looking for additional property. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would just reiterate to everyone, this committee is not deciding yes or no on any particular project. We are charged with looking at changes to the zoning regulations that would address these kinds of projects all over the county into the future. That's our job right now. So asking us to weigh in on a specific project, just not something we can do one way or the other. Is there anybody else, Scott?
If I could, Madam Chair, the recommendation was to accept public comment, really focused on the fire issue, because we have additional details in terms of the feedback that was received at the SCAC meeting and the presentation, how that went, and then also what right now, what some of the proposed or recommended text changes would be to the zoning code. So those could provide additional insights and information for folks to consider as well, even before they make the comments, and that their comments could be specifically about if they chose.
So I'm asking for specific comments. All right, is there any?
I think just on fire for this section, and then we've got more info.
Can I ask if there is any member of the public here who would like to comment on the fire safety issues that we had a presentation on here earlier? Did you just, you did once, sir? Yeah, I'm sorry. Anyone else? Okay. I think I'm going to cut off public comment. There will be another chance at the end when we can ask for comment again. But for right now, let's move on with our topic here.
Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so I'm just going to give a quick recap, excuse me, on our meeting that we had on January 20th. That was last Saturday at the Sedgwick County Association of Cities. Obviously, public input extremely important throughout this entire process. We had an event last Saturday morning that was open to all the cities that this is part of their regular meeting process, but we wanted to have MAPD staff present to discuss the large scale utility solar item. We had over 30 plus attendees. Several cities were in attendance. Representatives from several cities were in attendance, as well as several Board of County Commissioners members. So overall, a very positive event. I gave a longer version of the presentation that you saw this morning to the group, again, to receive any kind of feedback. Comment cards were available to those that attended this meeting at the Sedgwick County Association of Cities. Let's go to the next slide, please. Basically, the comments that we received as part of this meeting, again, we spoke on this particular topic. I probably spoke a little too long, to be perfectly honest, but again, a lot of good feedback was received. General comments from individuals that attended that meeting included that solar in Sedgwick County should be limited in size, scope, and location. We also received information from people regarding the 1 mile outside of the area of influence. There were some thoughts about having those zoning regulations limited to limit large-scale utility solar 1 mile outside of that overall area of influence. And then again, limits to the overall size of the solar project were some comments that we received, the project itself in terms of acreage. Setbacks or buffers between solar projects and residences, as well as separation between the solar projects themselves. So, there's one particular solar project and then creating a distance between that existing project and then another proposed project. Scott?
Sure. Just to provide some additional perspective on that, following Justin's presentation, there was some dialogue and some questions about how the area of influence process works. I remember that dialogue, but I wanted to just emphasize that these are individual comments that we received. It was not that the entire audience was saying, hey, this is the direction that it needs to be. I want to give you a sense of scale that these are individual comments that we received.
Thanks for the clarification, Scott. And yeah, this was, again, comment cards were available. This was information that we were able to gather from this meeting. Obviously, we wanted to share that with you today. Any comments or questions at all on this particular meeting? I'm happy to share any information.
Any questions for Justin from the committee? Honestly, Justin, from my perspective, it's sounds pretty predictable. It sounds like what we expected.
Okay, and I can go into the next topic, I guess, which is kind of the draft changes, some of the draft language that we've included throughout the presentation. I'm happy to discuss that with you if you're comfortable.
I think we're ready for that, yes.
Okay, great. So what we did was basically in your meeting packet, we included a 4-page draft text document. Again, just to reiterate, we won't be voting on this today, but it's kind of a visual representation of what we've been trying to accomplish throughout this process and a visual representation of what was available on these slides. So it was at the tail end of your packet. There's 4 pages there, and the changes are highlighted in yellow. And again, the information that is in this packet is no different than the information that's been shown on the screen throughout this process. As I went through those 4 themes, decommissioning, size and configuration, urban development and growth, and soil, all of that language has been incorporated into that draft text. So as it comes to soil and groundwater testing, we're requiring that any application be reviewed by the Sedgwick County Department of Environmental Resources. We have language in there about decommissioning, specifically relating to financial assurance, a statement of the proposed agreement that sets forth the date of the commencement, a statement of proposed agreement that the appropriate governing body be notified at the commencement and completion of a decommissioning plan, and a statement of proposed agreement which provides that all equipment or structures which are located below grade shall be removed at a minimum depth of 4 feet. Again, I'm just reiterating everything that was shown on the screen earlier. The applicant is obviously required to submit construction materials as part of their application process. But really, oh, and then height, of course, we mentioned height being limited to 25 feet for solar panels. So as it currently stands right now, it's 35 feet. That would be reduced to 25 feet. So I can go into each of those specifically or address any questions that you have on those comments. Again, this is just a draft. It is subject to change. As I mentioned before, between now and our meeting on February 8th, we will be receiving feedback from the Board of County Commissioners as well as several county advisory boards. So obviously the goal being February 8th to make a formal recommendation on these draft changes. But really, I just kind of wanted to draw your attention to that document, see if you had any questions with that legal language and answer any questions.
All right, any questions? When I think of how long we all have been at this and how much material you all have printed out for us, that it's down to 4 pages and some yellow highlights is pretty amazing and wonderful to me. Unless someone has some specific questions, my inclination would be for us to take this home, read it, cogitate on it. We're to the point now. We can't keep discussing forever. We need to decide what language we want to recommend to the Planning Commission as a whole to change our zoning code to be able to address issues related to commercial scale solar. That's our task. And if anybody has any comments they want to make right now, speak up. Mr. Johnson?
I guess my comments center around urban development and growth. I was the one that brought up, let's look at 1 mile as opposed to 3 to 5 or whatever it was. I think 3 to 5 limits so much property in Sedgwick County. It makes what's left very valuable and very competitive to buy. So I would suggest that we have to have consensus on the ring of influence outside of the city ring of influence. And I would suggest 1 mile. My alternative is, if we can't agree upon that, we just ban solar in the county.
Excuse me, Mr. Warren.
I'm in agreement in terms of the area that needs to be come to a consensus. But my number has been moving from, I had started off with looking at the 3 mile thing, then I moved to the 1 mile. And as we've come to the point where almost everything that we're doing follows the same conditional use process of going before cities, is create a new map doesn't make any sense to me. I would just, my suggestion would be to go back into whatever area the cities have as a sphere of influence would be the area they're going to continue to have that sphere, and that we not have any restrictions beyond that, other than the normal process that we're planning on going through. So we eliminate that map that shows the 1 mile and just go to the map that shows the city sphere of influence.
I would also agree with Mr. Warren. The small cities have legitimate concerns, but so do the landowners in the county. And the county, I mean, this is county, non-incorporated county land we're talking about. Each city already has a process in place within their urban area of influence, and extending that even farther for this particular kind of project and no other just seems unreasonable to me. I think the existing urban area of influence process does what it needs to do already without extending it another mile into the county.
If we all agree upon that recommendation, then we have a lot to talk about for the other 3 items. If we can't agree upon that, then it kind of makes it not necessary to talk about the other 3.
Kirk Sponsel, Deputy County Councilor. I just want some clarification as we've jumped from commissioner to commissioner. Are you basically saying that you want to leave it as is with the current processes and considerations of conditional uses? Or are you saying there should be no commercial solar within the urban growth area? Yeah, so there's been discussion about buffers around cities or around the urban area of influence. And just between you three, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page with what the thought process is. Is what you're thinking right now and trying to go for consensus just to leave everything as it is, wherein cities can provide input on their urban growth area? Or are you saying that there should be no commercial solar within that urban growth area, period?
The first.
Okay.
Likewise, the first. I mean, our goal today is to reach consensus. Our next meeting, we need to decide what language we are recommending to the Planning Commission as a whole. So if you have serious concerns with where we are as on a consensus, now's the time to speak up on it. Q?
Well, I have some concern. I mean, I know we have the city manager of Mays here, even though it's only one part of the county, but it's a pretty fast growing part of the county. It impacts a lot of people. It's growing faster than up 119th and 135th. It's growing faster than any other part of the city that we have right now. I know the city administrator of Mays is here. I'd like to hear from him, actually.
And I suspect we will when we get to the public input portion.
Okay, good. I'm through.
Well, I would just point out that there's kind of two things we're talking about, and Kirk made that clear. If we're discussing basically delineating certain parts of the county and saying there shall be no solar in here ever, or whether we're talking about the process by which cities in the county can have input into the process of deciding whether or not there will be solar near them. It's two different things. We already have a process in place where cities in the county can control what goes on inside their city limits pretty thoroughly. There's already a process in place with the urban area of influence that allows them to have additional influence on what happens anywhere they're likely to grow within between now and 2035. If they don't think their urban area of influence is big enough to accommodate their rate of growth, there's a process in place where they can approach the county and increase it. So what we're talking about as far as commercial solar, I think, is whether we want to layer on another layer to those already existing processes that only applies to solar, commercial solar, and doesn't apply to any other commercial or industrial project that might come along. My personal inclination is to not add on other layers when we already have an existing process that I think works adequately. But I want to hear what the rest of you think about it.
Yeah, I keep jumping around on this. I guess I kind of favor banning all solar within the urban area of influence. And then I still think we ought to have a mile, which we can discuss that it could be in that area.
Okay, thank you. Hugh?
Well, we always talk about the 2035. It's kind of odd that we do. I mean, it's 11 years away.
That just happens to be the
extent
of the current comp plan. But yeah, you're right. It's an arbitrary number.
It's a goofy number. It just is. I mean, if you're old enough in this room, you would know that everybody was in the farming business from 21st, probably from 13th up Mays Road. Now everybody's in the real estate business. And that's over the course of 40 years. So just think what the growth could potentially be like. Again, I go back to the northwest side, but up 119th and up 135th, all the way to the highway, particularly if the northwest circumferential ever happens, not in my lifetime, but if it ever happens, that'd probably just speed up the growth even more. So I think the small cities, the Colwiches, Andales, and Mazes have some right to try to protect themselves. You look at an industrial park in Maze, it's just exploded. It's going to jump across the railroad tracks. If you knew that area employs a lot of people. You know, a lot of people live out that way that work in those places. Good paying jobs. So I think we kind of have to think about that as well. I'm kind of leaning Joe's way myself, but that's me.
Okay, I would just remind everybody, I mean, we've been going back and forth on this for months now, but we're getting to the point where we have to make a decision one way or the other. Just saying. Cindy, are you looking like you want to say something, or are you just looking?
One thing I would say, I'm the state manager in Maze.
Can you?
We're not necessarily.
Can you wait, please, until we get to the public input process? We're close to it, but we still have to go through our arrangements here. Yes, you know what it's like. Okay, so
I guess I'm torn between the 1 mile or just doing away with the 1 mile. I could probably go either way.
And when you say that, do you mean no solar within that, or do you mean the city gets to decide?
No, I mean the city gets to decide.
Okay.
Well, in response to Deputy County Councilor, technically we wouldn't be giving the city the authority to decide in this matter. I
oversimplified. I'm sorry. The city gets more influence on the decision.
That.
Input. Well, all right. I mean, all right. I have to try and be legalese in my language, and I apologize. It doesn't come naturally to me. All right. We've heard from everybody except I think John. Do you want to speak up, or do you want to just?
I think we're going through a process now to try to meet the demand of what's coming. We don't know what's actually coming. And so I'm not here to say this right, wrong, or otherwise. I think everybody said has got their own ideas of what should and shouldn't be. And we come right down to it. And we're just trying to make the whole county more, I don't know, working together. You know, I made a comment when we first started talking about this. There's 2 or 3 of these towns that are very close to each other that might go together and co-op with some kind of an energy program of some sort. But that never went further than this. And they keep talking about how you're going to clean these places up. And I keep talking about there's no financial organization that I know of that will give you a 30-year bond or 30-year letter of credit. And number one. Number two, that the people that's going to do it couldn't afford it if they would do it. So, you know, I just think I'm trying to sit here and listen to the process and think that, you know, there's got to be something status quo, I don't think will make it go. I'm not talking about major changes, but the status quo just for this particular thing has to be, we have to go discuss it.
Okay, Chuck, did you have anything you wanted to add to what you said earlier? Okay, has everybody said what they want to say for today, bearing in mind that we have one more chance at this at our next meeting, at which point we will be into the weeds and specific about whether this proposed language is what we want to recommend to the whole planning commission, or whether there are changes we as a committee can reach consensus on to propose to the planning commission.
Madam Chair.
Yep.
I'm really torn here because the next meeting, I will not be here.
Okay.
And I have a doctor's appointment I've had for 4 months, and I'm not about to cancel it. So I hope I made my feelings, express my feelings as well as I can. Thank you.
All right. And just so I know, and can clarify what your feelings are. I'm still not clear on whether I think the 1 mile outside the existing urban area of influence is what you're talking about. But what are you talking about within that space? No solar, or just a process by which the cities have more influence on whether or not the solar project happens?
Yes, the latter.
The latter. Okay. So essentially treating the 1 mile, the urban area of influence plus 1 mile as if it were the urban area of influence for solar projects specifically and not necessarily for other projects.
Yes.
Okay. Scott?
Maybe just to give you all a breather, but one quick note is that we anticipate that this would be heard at the full MAPC on February 22nd. So Mr. Joe Johnson, to address that you may not be here or likely will not be here at the next advanced plans meeting, I just want to give you that date so that you've got that one as well.
My opinion is that they need to take our opinion.
That'll teach him. Okay, any other questions or comments from the committee? Justin, where are we? And are you ready to?
I don't have, excuse me, I don't have anything else to add additionally as far as my presentation goes today. I think we've received a lot of good feedback, but I'll turn it over to you. I don't know if you'd like to open up public comment or anything like that, but
I think I am going to try that, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Are there any members of the public here who would like to speak? Sir, come up, name and address, and 3 minutes.
Nick Gregory, I'm the city manager of Mays and currently live in McPherson, not quite moved yet. But I apologize. I thought you said city. I didn't realize you said Cindy. So otherwise I wouldn't have got up and said anything. So, you've gotten a letter from my governing body. You've gotten, I made comments at the last advanced plans meeting. The one thing I'll say is I will reiterate, we're not opposed to solar. So if you allow a small solar project attached to a potential business or, as if you look at the Mays High School right now, there you have a solar project that creates energy specifically for their location. So we're not necessarily opposed to that. I've talked with some folks that have been tied on the solar side of this. On the business and commercial side, specifically for site-specific solar. And, one possibility would be to limit the size of solar within those, if the direction was to go ahead and totally limit solar in the areas of influence. I'd go with a caveat that you eliminate or you limit the size of utility scale solar, not necessarily solar in general. It's possible you could have a 1 acre site that could be used for an industrial site and might be in conjunction with that industrial site that's there. So put some limitations potentially on solar as it impacts a site specific business or homes that might want to add solar as well. That's not I think as I've talked to my governing body, that's not the goal at all. It's to limit large scale utility scale solar from being in those areas of influence. So that's all I've got to add. You've heard from me multiple times, so that would be my only addition.
All right, hang around up there for a second, please. I suspect there will be questions for you, but let me ask staff first to clarify. I'm assuming that we already have regulations in place for the small scale solar, the kind of individual parcels specific he's talking about. And what we're trying to deal with is the large scale commercial solar. Is that correct?
Let me help everyone out. And so in JR, you help me out if I get this. But so what we're talking about today is in terms of the zoning code and the comprehensive plan really deals with utility scale, commercial scale solar. In instances like Mays High School, it's a great example. If it's a solar facility that's put in place and it's an accessory to a different principal use. So in this case, the principal use is the high school and the solar is an accessory use. that would not be, that's not covered by these regulations because that's considered an accessory use. So hopefully that's helpful with the conversation. Similar fashion, we've had some companies, not one in unincorporated Sedgwick County or Wichita, but there's a company that's potentially looking to expand, and they're looking at having a solar facility as part of their campus. Now, the solar portion of that is not the principal use or the primary use. It is an accessory use. So again, that would not be covered by this, nor questions that came up at the open house quite a bit were, what about solar panels on top of a house? Again, that is an accessory use. That is not the principal use. The residence is a principal use. So those solar panels would not be covered as part of what we've been discussing so far.
All right, thank you very much. JR, anything to add?
No, I think you got that right.
Okay, so just so everybody's clear on that, what we're talking about here is specifically utility scale solar. And that doesn't preclude the other kind, the smaller scale, but that's not what we're talking about. Okay, sir, did you have specific questions you wanted to ask our speaker?
No, I don't think so. There's no reason for me to continue talking. Oh, Hugh.
I answered.
Man, I'm terrible at communicating with you apparently, so sorry.
Mr. Nix.
Just so you know, I'm not Cindy. No, I was just hopeful that you'd have an opportunity to talk, only because I visited with you a little bit about what's going on with Mays and future development and where we are with the industrial park and where the growth lies and that kind of thing. So I just want to make sure that you had an opportunity to address the group.
And I want to address Mr. Neville. The reality of it is I understand that's your property, and ultimately it's been farmed for years, and farming may continue to be the thing. But I've been served on a planning commission before. I've been a planning administrator before. So when you look at planning, you look at long-term where a potential property could be over time, not necessarily attached to individuals that own those properties. And so planning is an important part of this. And from that perspective, you have to look at the sites over time, what it is currently and what it potentially becomes and how it conflicts with other properties. And so those are the things that I just encourage you as a planning board to look at and look beyond just necessarily owners, but look at the future of where those would be. And potentially you have 25-year leases with a potential for additional 25-year leases upon that. That's 50 years of potentially tying up solar sites. So just think about planning and where you want this county to go at some point in the future as you guys make whatever decision you make. So I know it's not an easy decision. I wish you best of luck.
Thank you. And yes, we do think about planning quite a lot here. So, but thank you very much. Appreciate it. All right. Is there anyone else, member of the public, who has not spoken before, sir? All right. Address, 3 minutes.
Yeah. So Alan Kloss Anderson, I'm with the Polson Law Firm. My office is in Kansas City and I live in Lawrence, just up the road from here, and represent Invenergy. And this one, I may be wearing a little my other hat, which is I'm a professor at the University of Kansas School of Law, where I teach renewable energy law. Land use and planning is a big part of that because that's obviously a key ingredient. So I'm going to touch a little more on the professorial type or part because it's a really interesting discussion and situation we have. There's a constitutional principle that there's one person, one vote. And that has been upheld in many different situations. I'll talk to you about a little situation separate that we have here in Kansas. And that is if things are going to be done unto you, you get a say, you as an individual say on the vote. What is being proposed here is you have residents and constituents in the unincorporated area of which they look to the county commission and this planning commission to be their voice. And if they don't like what's happening, they have a chance to vote. So they have a say in that process. What is being proposed is to abdicate responsibility over the people who have a chance to vote in these elections and give it to someone else of where they have no vote. So theoretically, whether it would actually win in a case, I don't know, but it would be a violation of the principle of one person, one vote, because you're taking the land use responsibility that is under this board, the county commission, and giving it to someone else and saying you no longer want a say in that. That is a really extraordinary act under kind of these principles that start with the Constitution. I went over a couple months ago about due process and how, what processes we give people when they're going to be impacted. Here we have landowners who own land in this area. They have no vote in these cities, and they're being told by a city, I want you to give me the authority over land where we have no say. The case that's being looked at right now in the state of Kansas is over the extraterritorial zoning laws, and that's in unzoned counties. So in unzoned counties, cities can pass zoning and extend that beyond their city limits up to 3 miles. That's being challenged because the people in that area have no one else to look to. But in that case, they're actually given representation on the planning commissions of these places. So they do have some voice in it. I think it's not adequate voice, but they have some voice. Here, if you take this and you extend it even into the area of influence where they have no vote or beyond, that is an extraordinary taking away of that one person, one vote principle. Additionally, what we're saying to these people is we want your land and we don't want to give you the choice of how you use it. And as was mentioned, you take away people's property rights one by one until they've lost value in that. Eventually, we get to use it for industrial purpose. In the general free market, particularly here where we don't have a use, we're at time. So very good. Okay, we'll get to that later. But again, the one person, one vote, this is extraordinary. I don't think we want to take that lightly.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the speaker? Could you come back to the?
No, it's not a question, it's a comment. The people don't have to lease this ground. So you're not taking away any vote from the landowner because the landowner is the one he's getting
Well,
paid.
I think he's talking about if we put in the regulations that say they can't lease their ground, even if they want to.
Right, but I agree. Yeah, people have the choice now to say, I don't want to do solar. I want to be part of industrial use. I want to be part of residential use. I can tell you the people that are out there farming or doing something else are saying, I don't want to be a part of an industrial use. They're making that vote now as individuals. That's the free market. They're right now deciding, is solar a better use out here or is something else? And again, it's a temporary use. So if you look out into the future, these projects of power purchase agreements, usually in the 20-year range, this land will be preserved for another use at that time. If it turns out industrial use is the better use, that will still be available. It could be something else by that time that isn't what the city wants. So even saying it's going to be preserved for exactly what the city wants would be, really a guess. But you're correct. They are voting right now with how they want to use it, but taking that choice away from them is what I was talking about, without voting literally a chance to vote.
So, okay, Joe, do you have questions? This was kind of the topic that you were concerned about. Do you have questions while our speaker is here? Okay, John, did you have something you wanted to say? Nope. Okay, thank you, sir, very much. Are there any other speakers, members of the public here who would like to speak? Please approach the podium. You have 3 minutes. Keep an eye on the clock. And
while they're walking up, Kirk Sponsel, Deputy County Councilor, just because there was legal analysis presented in that last speaker, certainly he's entitled to his opinion. I reserve the right to kind of give some general guidance to the board just publicly. I also reserve the right to provide you with legal advice privately as well. At this time, I would just say I'm comfortable with your current discussions and deliberations.
thank you, and we count on you for that advice, so please. All right, sir. Oops,
Yeah.
sorry, 3 minutes, please. Name and address first.
Gene Fields, I live at 6728 North, 135th Street West, College mailing address. I'll read a little something to you here. You know, this came up, we've known about this for years. So I've had a lot of time to do reading and research and thinking and so on. So I'd like to share this with you. These issues that we're experiencing around here, they're happening all over the United States. I mean, all over the world. I looked at a YouTube the other night and they're having a problem like we're experiencing here in I think England. You know, there's just hundreds of communities. And what's happening, there's a lot of unrest. There's a lot of energy spent. There's money spent. There's a lot of problems. There's public action groups, community action groups. There's people forming 501Cs, I think, so they can raise money to fight the stuff. And, you know, I don't consider that I don't consider that healthy, to be honest with you. You know, I think there's other things that the community could worry about, you know. And even in Kansas, you know, they've mentioned numbers, you know, Johnson County, Douglas County, Butler County, all these people that put stuff into play. And some of their regulations are like 40 pages. I mean, they're pretty thorough, you know, what they've done. So, and again, I'm out northwest, so I'm going to try to keep this county-wide. But when you take if you just think about taking a house anywhere in the county or taking a residential area and throwing up 40 feet away from your house, the current zoning, you put up an 8-foot fence and surround the house maybe on 3 sides, and that really is derogatory towards that particular development. And I don't think you're going to find any developers, okay, they're going to go out and want to build homes in an area that are surrounded by that kind of thing. So it does have a major, major impact, okay? And that's countywide, So, in the reading I've done online, you can't believe how much information you'll find online, and you got to take it with a grain of salt because to me, it falls in, there's 2 categories, okay? And there's groups that have an agenda, and with that agenda, they have a narrative that goes with it. So that's what you find on the internet a lot of times. So you find pro-solar people or people in the solar business, they want to create a narrative that tells you how wonderful everything is. You get people that are against solar, that's their agenda. So they're going to try to create a narrative to do that, and there's just dozens and dozens and dozens of questions and concerns that come up that you can find, on the internet in different places, And I mean, there's, the glaring visual, there's the fire hazard kind of thing comes up. There's
20 seconds.
Water and chemicals used to clean panels with. I mean, just a lot of things. And my thought is, from what you guys do, okay, what you're proposing to do, I think there's 3 things you could do, okay, that would take care of, would help a lot with all this other stuff.
Okay, you're out of time. Can you please just focus on the
summarize. Just the 1 mile thing would be really helpful, okay? And then I think when you look at the size and scale of it, whatever you can do in terms of the decommissioning and what you do with the waste.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much, sir. Okay. Anybody else here? Are there any questions from the committee for the speaker? Seeing none, is there anybody else here who would like to speak on this item? You know the drill.
I know the drill. Mitch Lucas, out of Denver, Colorado. I'm a project developer that works for Invenergy. We do energy development across the state of Kansas, and including some solar development work here in Sedgwick County. I just wanted to say, we've participated in a lot of these meetings over the past 4 months, and we really appreciate the committee's laser focus on how can we review and improve the regulations that were passed back in 2019 and make value-added adjustments to those. So with that being said, and I know that there's been some wading into discussion around specific projects, I'll try not to do that, but I just think as we continue to discuss potentially a 1 mile setback from urban areas of influence or just an outright ban of utility scale solar in these areas, I just think it's important that the committee understands that Invenergy is working on a project that would be affected by a recommendation like that. And we're aware of other solar developers that are working in Sedgwick County that would be affected as well. A ban on solar in urban areas of influence would outright kill the project that we're working on. And this is a project that we've been developing for over 4 years now. And Invenergy has invested millions of dollars in the development of this project. And you heard from one of Invenergy's participating landowners, Mr. Neville, today. He's been on board with Invenergy for several years now. And based on the regulations that were passed in 2019, he thought that utility scale solar was a perfectly acceptable potential use for his land. So I just would encourage the committee, please consider the perspective of Sedgwick County landowners who may be considering solar or who may already be participating for years at this point. I think that's really all I had for the committee today is that when you're considering a ban inside areas of influence or a setback, that would have a huge impact on projects that are already in the works today. And just to highlight, I mean, Scott, Chair Foster, there's been a lot of discussion about the existing conditional use permitting process in Sedgwick County. This is a process that allows projects to be considered on a case-by-case basis for the merits of the project to be discussed, conditions to be imposed if that's necessary. If we banned utility scale solar in areas of influence, that would be the only land use treated that way in the county from what we understand at our research. We just think it would be much more appropriate to consider these projects on a case-by-case basis, utilizing the county's existing conditional use permitting process. That's all I had.
All right, any questions for the speaker? Thank you, appreciate it. All right, anybody else? Any other members of the public?
Hi, folks. My name is Walt Chappell. I live at 3165 North Porter. I first came to Wichita area in 1955, and the Maze was a little tiny blip on the radar at that time. I think most of us know that. It's kind of like in many of our areas, we grow, sometimes with planning and sometimes just because that's where developer found a place of land and was able to buy it at a cheap price and put up a bunch of houses. So urban growth is being taken place, but we have little areas where we haven't infilled at all. When you look at the map of Maze as an example, it's got all kinds of land developed and it hasn't been used. So to go outside and say we're going to pick and choose what projects are going to be available to be used on that land is not right at all. I don't think we have any reason to assume that's the way to develop any economic growth. And speaking of economic growth, we all need electricity. If this county is going to expand its industry, its homes, its electric vehicles, any of those things we want for our future, we have to have electricity. And currently, the utility scale solar is the only way in which large enough amount of surface area can be provided for the sun to convert those photons from the sun into electrons for us to use in our grid. It's a process that God's decided is the only way that we create electricity from the sun. You have to have surface area. So for utility scale solar to be functional, for it to pay back, for the investment to be made, you have to have enough surface area. And that means you need land to go with it. So many of you as farmers know that you have conservation easements and you have a possibility of taking your land out of production, put it in conservation for like 10 years. If some of these farmers around Mays or Andale or Colwich decide to do that, they wouldn't have any influence. The cities could not tell them, okay, we're going to put a housing development here. We're going to expand our industrial park there. No, that land's already tied up. So I think that we have to plan ahead for the economy of the whole county. You have Integra, they want to have solar collectors in their area. You have McConnell Air Force Base that has land. You have the airport at International Wichita Airport. I was just noticing that Kansas City International Airport has a 500 megawatt solar project they are planning to build in 2024. On the airport property, they have 3,000 acres that's available to be used, and they're going to put solar there as a way to provide electricity. So don't shoot ourselves in the foot. Let's have the economic development planning of our whole county take into effect. We need solar, we need electricity. Let's work together to get that done.
All right,
I
thank you
for your time.
Any questions? You?
Yeah, I have a question. I guess I don't disagree with what you said, but I wonder how much my electricity bill is going to go down if we get a large scale solar farm.
Hugh, that's a great question because what we have is supply and demand. The demand's going up. We have coal-fired, we have gas-fired, we have a number of plants that are being decommissioned. And so that means there's less electricity in the grid for us to use. With less electricity, they jack up the price. With more electricity being produced from the sun and wind, you have a chance to bring down the price. So not only is it allowing us for economic growth, but we also have a reduction in the cost for the consumer. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I don't believe it, but it answers my question. Yeah. I don't believe that my electric bill is ever going to go down, even if we have a 2,000 acre.
Well, I know there's a word called greed, and sometimes that gets in the way of actually relating the cost and benefit.
And just as an aside, I know a little bit about layout ground, and generally what you lay out is your most unproductive ground, you know? Your alkali holes, your sandy ground, to answer your question. In terms of conservation, we do that, but we're pretty smart about what we lay out as well, so.
Well, the land has a chance to recoup, doesn't it? When you put it under a fallow situation, that land is going to regenerate. It's going to allow more of the roots to go down in the soil to capture moisture and water. This is a good practice for farmers, and they're doing it all over the world. I want to make one final point. I think some of you have received an understanding of where Kansas fits across the nation. We're 46th out of all the states in our use of solar. Colorado next door is 12th. We have billions of dollars at stake that are going to be invested now in the next 4 or 5 years all across this country. If we shoot ourselves in the foot and don't allow these projects to come in, we're not going to benefit from that investment.
All right, any other questions for the speaker? Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Is there anyone else, any member of the public here who would like to speak on this item? Approach the podium. 3 minutes. Please keep an eye on the time and give us your name and address first.
My name is Leroy Bosch. I live at 6716 North 135th West College. I'd like to address something that's been brought up here numerous times today, and that is population density. I took some data from the 2020 census on population of Sedgwick County and that, and what I determined here is that this is first of all, I'd like to define utility scale solar, which is 20 acres or larger. It's for commercial use. And population density was cited by Harvey County as one of their reasons. Now, the potential for utility scale solar in Sedgwick County primarily is dissected by 135 in the southern part of the county and the western part of the county from there. In the unincorporated areas of the county, there are 34,136 residents in unincorporated areas of the county. This number also approximates the combined population of 34,594 residents that are in the cities of Andale, Bentley, Cheney, Clearwater, Colwich, Garden Plain, Goddard, Mays, Mount Hope, Mulvane, Sedgwick, and Valley Center. These are 12 of the 20 cities in Sedgwick County. That's about 70,000 residents that your decision's going to impact out there on changes to the UZC. So my suggestion is that since there are other projects that we just heard are consideration in that, the impact on the lives and the future of this many people in this unincorporated and the smaller cities of the county should be a major consideration. Do you want to deal with these one time, or you want to deal with them on multiple individual cups? And I wish you luck in determining that. Thank you for your time and consideration. But the wide area in this map is where a lot of these people live that you folks have been talking about. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the speaker? All right, is there anyone else who would like to speak? All right, seeing none. Let's bring it back. Our recommended action is to just come to a consensus. We don't need a motion. Does anybody on the committee have any comments they want to take out where we are on consensus? Joe?
Could I ask a question to our attorney? John has brought up several times about how do we protect ourselves from decommissioning, since you can't get probably a 30-year letter of credit or 40-year letter of credit. What recommendation do you have?
Yeah, Kirk Sponsor, Deputy County Councilor. We, within the proposed language that has been passed out, there's still a requirement that they provide either some sort of bond or cash or other type of backing. At this point, I don't know if we're going to include letter of credit due to questions arising around that, but there is some degree of requirement still of that fiscal surety within the proposed language.
Who would write a bond?
That's not within my wheelhouse or area of expertise.
I mean, I think there needs to be a lot more research.
But I do think that, and Justin Constantino can correct me if I'm wrong, but I do think that this somewhat replicates what we've seen in other areas after they've done analysis. They still require bonds and things of that nature. Is that correct?
I can confirm that when we were doing our research with other communities, that was typically the language that was found.
I understand that, but how does it protect us? I think that was John's question. We're not really being protected because I'm probably not going to get it.
I see. Well, if the way the language is if they don't provide that type of fiscal surety, were it to be approved ultimately and put into the unified zoning code, then it would be a requirement and their application wouldn't be approved unless they were able to provide that.
We're potentially limiting further the use of solar.
It would be one of the requirements with the application.
Do we want to ask staff to check with perhaps our financial people in the city and see whether we're making a bunch of assumptions here, and nobody in this room apparently, I certainly don't know if it's possible to get a 30-year surety or not. So can we find out? Is there a way to find out?
I can commit that what we can do is we can reach out either to finance or seek also with legal to find who would be the best person who can help address that question and have them here at the next advanced plans meeting.
I would appreciate that. I think it's something that's clearly on people's minds. And if we can get an actual answer, that would be helpful, right, John?
One source might be to talk to the people that are in the business, and it's required in other locations how they handle it.
Okay. All right. Any other comments or questions, bearing in mind again that by our next meeting, we want to come to consensus on actual language in the zoning code that we want to change or recommend be changed to the whole planning commission. If not, is there anything else from staff? Chair?
Madam Chair, thank you. I have a question. It's clarification. I want to make sure that I understood the intent of the board. It's on deals with item number 3 on the back page. It's a statement of proposed agreement that the appropriate governing body will be notified at the commencement and the completion of the SECS reclamation and decommissioning plan. The consensus from the last meeting was plan shall indicate, scratch that. Applicant shall provide a statement that owner operator will notify the city county in advance of decommissioning. So the question is the way current number 3 is currently written reflecting your intent, or do I need to add in advance of, in addition to what's already there?
I will say phrases like in advance of make me a little nervous because how far in advance, a minute and a half?
That would be my next question. If we want to go ahead and add advance, is it 30 days, 60, 90, 120? There to be some time frame specified.
Given, as we all know, to our extreme annoyance sometimes, how long processes take to work through city and county planning, I would opt for a somewhat longer notice, like 6 months, 3 months at the minimum, just because we know how long it takes to get on agendas and wait for meetings to happen. What the rest do you think? How far in advance should the cities and counties be notified before a decommissioning process takes place? Cindy?
Well, I agree, 6 months. And it's not like, I think that decommissioning, they're just going to decide that, 30 days beforehand. Anyways, I think that they would plan long enough ahead of time that they would have that 6 months timeline to make the notification.
If there are other cities that have some timeline in place, then there's some logic to it, but my personal off the top of my head number would be like 4 to 6 months.
Okay, if that's the consensus of the group, then I will work that in there. Thank you.
Thank you, JR. Okay, anything else we need to talk about?
Kirk Sponsor, Deputy County Counselor. I know that there were a few comments of interest at the presentation of Fire Chief Timmons. I just wanted to clarify, was it the consensus of the board that language be worked in to address fire reviewing the site plan and potential battery placement and approval consistent with the code?
I think so, yes. I think everybody's nodding and I would say absolutely yes. That's our consensus.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else? In that case, just so everybody knows, our next committee meeting is Thursday, February 8th at 10 a.m. and meeting adjourned.